Hello, everybody. Welcome to the At Hearst and Mom podcast. I'm Lauren Rose, and today we're talking to Dr. Amy Behimer, board certified functional medicine health coach, doctor of pharmacy, MS warrior, and creator of Autoimmune Academy. She helps autoimmune warriors who are ready to fuel their bodies and minds to feel better and live their best lives. She reversed two autoimmune diseases through small, consistent, feels good and is good for you habits, and encourages others it's possible for them too. Thanks for coming on, doctor.
Oh, absolutely, and call me Amy.
I will try. I love that you have a background in conventional and functional medicine. I think that makes you a superior doctor to a lot of just the conventional doctors. So that's exciting, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Great. Yeah, I do find that sometimes the two worlds can pit themselves against each other. And I really do try to just provide a space for people who are interested in one or the other or both, like I am myself. So thank you for that.
That's very cool. So walk us through your autoimmune disease journey. Tell us about that.
Sure. I got my first diagnosis with autoimmune disease at age 17. Over the next 15 years, I ended up getting three more autoimmune diagnoses. So four total. The biggest one that has impacted my life was at age 27. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And really the story as a whole, now looking back, autoimmune diseases tend to cluster. And so I really spent a lot of years in fear and anxiety about yet another diagnosis. So if anybody out there, if any of your listeners have had an autoimmune diagnosis, statistically, you're likely to have another one if you don't already. And so really that fear and that anxiety is what was my biggest barrier coming out on the other side in terms of how to think about autoimmune disease.
Yeah, so how did you end up reversing two of your autoimmune diseases?
So it really started for me in about 2014. I came across a TEDx talk by a well-known functional medicine provider named Dr. Terry Walls. And she was a secondary progressive multiple sclerosis patient who was a practicing physician, and her health was going downhill fast. And she took it into her own hands to start researching and start seeing what she could do related to lifestyle to complement conventional medicine. And so she made some pretty significant, amazing discoveries in terms of getting down to the root cause of what causes autoimmune disease and multiple sclerosis and starting to make those changes to lifestyle. Since then, I have really taken those lifestyle recommendations, which helps with all autoimmune diseases and really all human bodies, since we're all wired with the same cells from the ground up, and really have started implementing the diet, the movement, the stress management, the mindset work, and the rest and relaxation that helps the body heal. So I credit the reversal of a couple of my autoimmune diseases to truly just taking care of my cells and feeding my body high quality ingredients that, as it turns over, as we all do, our cells are always rebuilding themselves and making new tissues and making new organs and making new systems. So almost a decade of putting a focus on this, I truly believe that I am turning over healthier and stronger cells.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense too. After you became a doctor, I guess you still had a couple of autoimmune diseases. How does it feel to be a doctor with autoimmune disease? Does it seem ironic?
It's interesting. We learn all about multiple sclerosis or other chronic diseases in pharmacy school. And overwhelmingly, I left school with the belief that it was a chronic, debilitating, progressive disease. And that thought pattern, that mindset truly left me feeling fearful and uncertain of the future. And so when I started getting into functional medicine, and specifically, the mindset work of how we look at our health, um, I started realizing we have a lot more control of our health and of our environment than I learned in pharmacy school. So we obviously have genes that can predispose us to certain diseases, but the thing I didn't learn in pharmacy school that I have spent a lot of time learning since and teaching others is the environment is what turns genes on or off. And so we actually have a massive control of our environment that impacts how our genes are expressed and whether we turn on the good ones or turn off the bad ones. So that would be the biggest difference since leaving pharmacy school that I have recognized and has allowed me to go from that fear and uncertainty to a place of more empowerment and hope.
Yeah, wow. So you kind of answered the next two questions, but I just want to see if you have anything else to add. What else did you learn about chronic pain or autoimmune disease from being in the medical field?
So the main areas that related to the environment that we have the ability to turn up and down to improve upon are, I kind of like to group them, I call it the habit hub, but it's these 6 main areas that if you're talking with many people about health and wellness in today's day and age, there's a lot of recurring themes. And everybody has a different way of grouping them and describing them. But I think it's good news that you'll start to hear pretty consistent patterns in terms of what can help us heal. And so when I talk about what these daily habits are that can help us heal, I group them into one of 6 categories. So one of them is definitely using food as medicine. So looking at what we eat and how that fuels our body. The other one is movement as medicine. So looking at even just small amounts of movement, because as anybody with autoimmune disease or with neurologic or movement disorders or with a good deal of pain, sometimes they hear movement and they think, well, I can't do that. But really movement comes down to even micro moves. So things that we, ways that we can move our body, obviously being cognizant of what is safe and what we're able to do. So that's 2, nutrition and movement. The third one is rest and relaxation. So the importance of sleep and the importance of how we let our bodies really recuperate and rest. The fourth one is related to connection. So connection with others is huge when we talk about environment. So our relationship with the people around us and even our relationship with ourselves. The fifth one is good stresses. So when I say good stresses, that is, most people understand the concept of going to the gym and your muscles get sore, and that's a good thing. Well, there's other ways that we can stress our bodies in good ways so that on the back end of that, our cells actually start to repair and rebuild themselves in a way that they come back stronger. And the last one, and where I think I saved the best for last, in my opinion, is mindset, or how we think about the various things, because just like food can be toxic, or we can have toxic things in our environment, if our thinking patterns are, very skewed on the negative side, then we can actually get some toxicity from our thoughts.
So, what about, being in the functional medicine field? What have you learned kind of that doctors don't know or doctors don't tell us?
That's a great question. Um, you know, I would go back to this, the amount of control we do have over how we think and ultimately how we feel. Because what we know about the brain is our thoughts are what create our feelings. And depending how we feel, that drives what actions we take or maybe don't take. And so I think that the power of recognizing the thought patterns that are happening and the power of controlling and choosing to think thoughts that serve us is something that's just not talked about as much. In addition, the amount of healing that can happen when we reduce the amount of processed foods that are in our diet. It's tough to overcome the amount of normalization there is in the world to, the convenience and the ease of eating a certain type of way. But I would say just that whole foods and there's not one diet that's right for everybody, and anybody who thinks that there is, you definitely want to find someone that recognizes we are all unique and all different. But the common theme amongst all people with autoimmune disease or with pain is that we can use our food in a way that helps us heal instead of, damaging the different areas of our body, and ultimately ends up making a lot of our symptoms a lot worse.
I love knowing that there is control. I've been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease when I was 35. And that doctor, since autoimmune disease is systemic, he didn't want to name it. He just said, you have autoimmune disease. Now, my another rheumatologist, she was like, no, you've got rheumatoid arthritis. But it's just good to know that I do have some control over how I feel. So it's definitely something that I'm going to be working on.
Absolutely. And there are right now 80 to 100 that have a name, autoimmune
Mhm.
disease wise, but the estimation is really more up into the mid 100s. And the commonality between all of the autoimmune diseases, is that our body is attacking ourselves in one way or another. So what that looks like will be different depending on what body system is affected first. But the alarming rise in autoimmune disease and the pain that often comes with it for a lot of these diagnoses is such a good pause and reason to look and say something about, our modern world is not agreeing with our bodies, and our bodies, I like to believe our bodies are never wrong. It's a it's a tough belief if it's sometimes it's easy to feel angry that our bodies are failing us, but if we put a little trust in them and try to listen to them to see what they're trying to tell us, it can be a more empowering stance to take.
That's such an interesting point because back when I first became disabled for the first couple of years, I was very angry at my body because it was betraying me. I was 35, 36 years old with, chronic joint pain that was debilitating. And I was like, what the heck? Why? I'm not old.
Yeah.
Why is my body doing this to me? So I did learn going through a pain recovery program that pain is a communication tool that our body uses to tell us something.
Yeah.
So I love just what you just said about, listening to our bodies and trying to figure out what it's trying to tell us.
Yeah. And of course it's natural to, feel angry or feel frustrated. And, a lot of this, when I talk about mindset, it is not dismissing that we are human beings that will have positive feelings and we'll have negative feelings. And it's never, I never want anyone to hear what I say about practicing a more positive mindset to dismiss that negative half, because those are just as important. But
Mm.
in terms of, I like to use this, I don't know if this will uh, be a good description, but if if we pain is very personal, so whatever that pain is, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, we all have a personal relationship with our pain. And so if we, let's say on a scale of 0 to 100, if you had to assign your pain a number for you, there's no right or wrong answer, but you are able to assign what that pain is. I think of our mindset work as a dial to be able to dial that up or down. And, so we're not saying that we can think our way out of pain or out of autoimmune disease, but if we had the ability to make tweaks to that mindset or that collection of thoughts up or down, it's amazing to give it a try and see what can happen when we do. Because I definitely have used that on myself with how I feel about my multiple sclerosis, or what some of the limitations that it does give me in terms of symptoms, and just reframing it and thinking of it from a different perspective and practicing letting in a few more positive thoughts than negative definitely allows me to dial down that pain I'm feeling from living with that diagnosis.
Yeah, and you've got a quote that I read that says, "Diagnoses happen, negative mindsets make them harder." Talk about that motto, I guess, of yours.
Yes, I love that, and say it often. And it just acknowledges that the pain or the diagnosis, those things may be outside of our control. And so recognizing that, it's not belittling that it's not happening. They are there in our lives. Everybody, most likely, if you're human and living in the world, experience pain in some way, whether it's emotional, physical. But the part that we can control is that mindset, which is the collection of our thoughts. And so, there are absolutely things we can do to help our body function better. So, changing the food that we're eating, or the way we move, or, how well we are able to rest and things like that can absolutely help our body function better. But the other piece of that, like I mentioned, is working on our mindsets, and allowing there to be some peace in knowing that we do have power over that. And a lot of times, thoughts that we are thinking are so automatic and they're so on repeat that they're actually under our conscious level of even realizing that they're there. For me, I for years had a thought running on loop, on autopilot, that my life would never be as good because I had multiple sclerosis. And it's easy to think that thought is true because, friends and family could agree, and I had a lot of evidence for it. But when I realized I was thinking that, and became intentional to try to replace that thought with something that is also true, but served me more, even, a thought like, it's possible my life can be just as good with multiple sclerosis. And so I spent years in that gray area of how could this be true? And now, 11 years later, I absolutely believe it's true. I think that, for focusing on that thought and asking myself, how is that true, for long enough, you start to find evidence. Your brain likes to go to work to find evidence to answer questions. And, a few ways that I think that's true is I am healthier in all these other ways than I never would have been if I didn't have multiple sclerosis. I probably would still be drinking 8 to 10 Diet Cokes a day and eating, whatever was put in front of me. So one of the ways that my life is better is health in all these other areas. And another way is just getting called to do this work and work with other people with autoimmune disease and pain, and helping them just by leading by example, and using my experience to help others. I definitely think that's a reason that my life is better, because of multiple sclerosis.
That's so cool. So tell us a little bit about the work that you've done with people living with pain and autoimmune disease.
Sure. So a few years ago, I've been a pharmacist for about 15 years. But a few years ago, I decided to go back to school and got educated on the world of health and wellness coaching, life coaching, and functional medicine. So that's how I work with people now. I obviously have a pharmacy background and always will have that lens on the things I do. but I really work with people through one-on-one coaching, through group coaching. I actually have a program called Autoimmune Academy where people can come in and we really learn and we do. So there's a lot of teaching that goes on, what's going on in our body, what are the things that, the small steps we can take to start healing. And that's paired with coaching, which is such an amazing tool for anybody who hasn't tried it. That's one of the huge things that I credit with my shifts is investing in a coach. And we as humans, we're not very good at looking inside our own brain. So sometimes it's just really nice to, have someone from the outside help show us some of these things that, may be so deep within us that we don't question them. And so it's a great way to get support and kind of shake things up. I always say if we've been, feeling a certain way or doing the same things for a while, kind of raising your hand and admitting that, hey, maybe I could take a fresh look at this, or maybe I could learn and be inspired by others that are trying things a different way. So that's really how I work with people.
Yeah. So, what are a couple of maybe small habits that we can do to feel better?
I love this question. One small habit that I kind of alluded to, but said a different way, is the habit of not believing everything you think. So it's very easy uh, to start believing that our thoughts are just the capital T truth. And, if we have a practice of being able to question those thoughts or get them outside our brain and look at them, that could be through journaling, that could be through coaching, that could be through, some people find that when they do movement, so whether they're in nature or taking a walk, but the habit is just to not believe everything you think without questioning it and asking if it's really serving you. I want to say one other small shift is really taking a look at the move from processed foods to a more less processed diet. And as I mentioned, there is no one right diet for anybody, but it is pretty safe to say that the amount of processed food and added sugar that exists in the American diets, almost 60% by the best estimate, is food that with ingredient lists we don't even recognize. So if somebody wants to start somewhere, it can be just teeny tiny of reading an ingredient list or thinking, finding one replacement for a food item that they really enjoy, but trying to find a brand that maybe uses cleaner ingredients. Any teeny tiny shift in that really adds up over time. It can feel overwhelming if you look at your whole life and say, oh my gosh, I need to change everything about my diet. Just start small with one thing, and let the goodness from that compound day after day.
Those are great, great tips. So, you talked earlier about good stressors. What maybe is an example of a good stressor that can help our bodies heal?
Yeah, so good stressors fall into one of four categories for the most part. I mentioned the one physical. So a lot of people, like I mentioned, understand the idea of physical movement, stressing our body in a good way, and we come back stronger, building muscle. So my favorite one for that is if I'm waiting for the coffee to brew, leaning against the counter and doing a counter plank. That's an example of a good stressor physically. Metabolically, the stressors that can be good for us are letting our body go for periods of time without having to digest food. So a lot of people hear about intermittent fasting or fasting, but not even jumping into the whole fasting world. Any amount of time that we can allow our body to rest digestively can be a good stress on our metabolism. So that's one idea. Mentally, my favorite mental stress is doing my daily Wordle. So anything that feels challenging, anything that maybe puzzles or crossword puzzles, or I'm terrible at this, but turning off your GPS and trying to get somewhere by
Oh, no.
yeah, I know. I give that one as an example, yet I don't practice what I preach. I don't like being lost.
Yeah.
And the last one would be emotional. I mean, a lot of times we avoid or we resist maybe some of these negative feelings that come up. And a way that we can practice a good stress is in a safe way, embrace a negative emotion, so allow your body to feel it and get curious about it, and really allow and process a negative emotion. So those are, one example from each of the areas of what I like to call good stress.
Those are great examples, and it makes a lot more sense to me now when you're talking about good stress.
Yeah, you're like, what do you mean good stress? Yeah,
It's like, what? There's no
yeah,
such thing.
yeah.
So, what's one piece of advice you'd give to people suffering from chronic pain or autoimmune disease?
Honestly, the advice that I wish I would have had sooner, but I'm glad I got it, was, you know, recognizing that I didn't have to do it alone, and that outside support really can just cause a shift in our thinking that can just be life changing. And so for me, that was getting a coach. Now, of course, as a coach, I see the value all the time, but it's just amazing to be able to get outside your own brain, be able to have someone else reflect it back to you, kind of what some of your patterns are, what some of your subconscious thinking is, and really be able to provide some outsider perspective. I like to say that you want to find some support that has good, high quality information. So that's the first I, is evidence-based information. So make sure that it's coming from a source you trust. Inspiration. So it'd be great if you get to come together in a community of other people that are kind of going after the same goals as you and similar experiences. It's amazing what inspiration can do. That's the second I. And then insight. So that's where coaching comes in, is insight into you, your body, your brain, and what works for you.
That's awesome. I love that you have the science-based information, but also, hold room for community and for, more natural and environmental, alternatives.
Yeah, thank you.
So, where can we get more information about you and about your Autoimmune Academy?
Sure. I have my website, which is www.amybeheimercoaching.com. And that has information on more about how to work together and things like that. Also on that site, there are free resources. So one that I mentioned earlier about, taking a look at what ingredients we're eating. I actually have a how to decode ingredient list to help grocery shop with confidence. So that is on there. I also have a great gut health checklist for everyday habits to help with gut health, which helps with all sorts of things that we're experiencing, whether it's pain or autoimmune disease. But really, yeah, all the information can be found there. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Great, and I'll have that website in the show notes in case anybody needs to know how to spell it. Well, thank you for coming on. This has been delightful.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate you and just the message. And it's been great to listen to some episodes and learn more about you and your guests. So I feel honored to be on. Thank you.
Thanks. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any health, parenting, or life advice. For my freebie, 30 Ways to Relieve Pain Without Taking a Pill, go to ithurtstomom.com/tips or @ithurtstomom on Instagram under pain relief. If you have any comments, suggestions, or want to be on this podcast, email me at ithurtstomom@gmail.com. I wish everybody a blessed and healthy day.